Hi, in this video I'm going to be reading a story from a book called The Time Traveller's Guide to Medieval England. I thought it's quite appropriate because at the moment I'm in a little village in Warwickshire, and as you can see from the surroundings, this is a fantastic renovation. I'm actually based in a little Castle Folly at the moment, but what I want to do is to start a chapter, and this is called Castles and Fortified Manor House. Often, modern historians declare that the great age of castle building is over by 1300. If you stand in front of Windsor Castle in the 1350s or Bodiam Castle in the 1380s and watch the dozens of carts and wagons carrying stones and timbers daily across the muddy approach roads, you might disagree. Castles and fortified manor houses continue to be built and rebuilt on a massive scale. One reason for this is security. Dozens of new licences to crenellate are issued by the king, especially in the reign of Richard II, when there are renewed fears of invasion of both France and Scotland. But there is another reason for all the rebuilding. Older castles are increasingly proving to be uncomfortable, with their small chambers and gloomy halls. All over the country you will find noblemen rebuilding their homes in pursuit of greater luxury. The Earl of Devon almost entirely rebuilds his castle at Okehampton. The Earl of March rebuilds his family seat at Wigmore and develops Ludlow Castle on a truly palatial scale. The Earl of Warwick rebuilds Warwick Castle in a similarly extravagant fashion, with the new Great Hall, new Gatehouse, and two of the finest residential towers in the kingdom, Guy's Tower and Caesar's Tower. Lord Neville rebuilds his castles at Bamburgh and Raby. Lord Berkeley rebuilds most of the domestic ranges at Berkeley Castle. John of Gaunt rebuilds his domestic ranges within his great castles at Kenilworth and Hertford. His younger brothers, Edmund and Thomas, rebuild Fotheringay Castle and Caldecott Castle, respectively. Most of all, their father, Edward III, repairs or extends a huge number of royal castles. He also builds his last completely new royal castle at Queenborough, at a cost of £25,000. His works at Windsor Castle, where he rebuilds practically everything within the outer walls, cost more than £50,000, making it the most expensive building project in medieval England. If the 14th century is not the great age of castle building, then it is certainly the great age of castle rebuilding, where new fortified residences are constructed. They are designed to overawe and entertain, as well as to defend. The dozen most important new castles from the late 14th century are all well defended buildings with high towers, drawbridges and portcullises, but they are all symbolic of lordly power as well. Life within them is comfortable, with large halls, well-lit solars, substantial kitchens and bakehouses, and enough chambers to allow every visiting esquire to have a room of his own. If anything distinguishes these new castles from the 12th and 13th century predecessors, it's the number of chambers they have. By 1350, noblemen have shifted their priorities from communal defence to incorporate individual privacy. Bodiam Castle, for example, has more than 30 rooms which can be used as private bedchambers. When you come to a castle or fortified manor house and have crossed the drawbridge, you will catch sight of the courtyard. This is typically square in a 14th century residence, with the whitewashed walls and glazed windows of the hall, solar and chapel facing it. If the lord is in residence, liveried servants will be scampering around, carrying food from the storerooms to the kitchen, fetching water from the well to fill the dozens of pots for heating bathwater, carrying firewood to stack inside the hall. A groom will proceed to show you around. This door leads through to the ale cellar, this door to the general kitchen, this door to the meat stores, that door over there to the chapel, and this set of stones to the staff dormitory above the storerooms. If you look up, you'll see the hall and solar are roofed with lead. Above the whole building flies the armorial banner of the Lord. As in every other medieval building, the centre of life is the hall. Noble halls vary in size primarily according to the function of the building as a whole. more so than to the status of the lord. The hall of the Earl of Devon's castle at Oakhampton, which is little more than an administrative centre and a hunting retreat, is 44 foot long, 24 foot wide and about 40 foot high. The usual size of a hall, a manor house or a rich merchant's townhouse. That of a wealthy king's country seat may be far larger. Sir John Pulteney's Great Hall at Penshurst, a fortified manor house, is 62 foot long, 39 foot wide and no less than 60 foot high. The chief castles or fortified manor houses of the nobility have halls on a similar scale, with exposed wooden roof beams of architectural complexity, albeit darkened with smoke. For example, the Earl of Huntingdon's Hall of Dartington is 69 foot long, 38 foot wide and 48 feet high. The floors of such halls are often covered with patterned tiles. In the middle is a fire raised on flagstones. All the interior walls are plastered and painted, either with red lines imitating course of stonework or more elaborate designs such as heraldry, moons and stars or bees, butterflies and flowers. At the upper end of the hall, raised on days, are the Lord's table, his chair and several benches. Projecting out above the principal seat in the centre is a rich canopy known as a baldaquin, of the red silk of which hangs down like a curtain behind the seat. Before each meal, the serving lads put up trestle tables along each side of the hall. They bring brightly glazed green and gold ceramic wine jugs and ale flagons and set out in readiness. Other places candles on the spikes protruding from the walls and light the candles on the chandeliers. These are iron or silver hoops, above 6 feet and about 6 feet in diameter, raised on pulleys. On the Lord's table, a plain white linen tablecloth is placed reached to the floor. Then a second cloth with a coloured strip down at the centre is placed above it. This is the sanap, of which the choicest dishes will be placed for the delectation of the Lord and his guests. Brightly coloured cushions are placed on the benches on the dais. Good quality wax candles are impaled on the spikes and three-legged candlesticks on the Lord's table, along with the other precious luxuries such as the gilt silver salt cellar and enamelled gilt silver drinking cups. What will impress you about life is the castle is not so much the gold and silver, but the scale of everything. A man who drinks out of an enamelled gilt silver cup is rich, but a man whose steward drinks out of such a cup is powerful. Most barons have 45 men in their household. The Earl of Devon has 135 in 1384, the Bishop of Ely 83. John of Gaunt, the richest Englishman of the century, excluding the kings, has 115, but this does not include a further 150 armed retainers contracted to serve him when he wants them. Edward II has about 450 to 500 men in his household in 1318. Edward III has considerably more than 800 in the period 1344, during much of which time he is fighting abroad. In more peaceful 1360s, he has between 350 and 450. The largest household of all in peacetime is not that of the king, it is that of Thomas, Earl of Lancaster, cousin to Edward II, who at the start of the century has no fewer than 708 men. Imagine travelling along the highways of northern England with that small army buzzing around. People come out of their houses just to see him pass by. As you wander around the castle, you may be surprised to see there are hardly any females present. Of the 135 people in the Earl of Devon's household, only 3 are women. This is normal, even in those households which are headed by a woman. A washerwoman might be employed. Cleaning clothes is strictly a woman's job in medieval England, but she will not live within the household. The only resident females will be the Lord's wife and daughters and their personal companions. Kitchen staff, grooms, valet, pantlers, butlers, even the dishwashers, all of these positions are filled by men and boys. If the men choose to marry, then they must leave the Lord's household and set up their own. When processing into the hall, say before a great feast, the marshal of the hall will direct a couple of grooms to make sure that everyone enters and seated enters to their status. Even the lower ranks, the gentleman, valet, and grooms of the household and lesser servants are seated hierarchically. The most senior officers sit next to the dais, on the right-hand side of the lord. The table is called the reward. Opposite is the second mess. At this more privileged end of the hall are seated more important men, such as the lord's chief retainers, his chaplain and steward, and any other important guests. Further down are the chief household servants, the almoner, and the keeper of the wardrobe, the clerk of the kitchen and receivers of the lord's manors, the marshal of the stables, the cofferer, and the lord's secretary. Further down are more menial members of the household, the gardener, the slaughterer, the baker, the brewer, the candlemaker, the farrier, the blacksmith, the poulterer, messengers, and other servants, although some households have separate hall for these men. So I just wanted to read a quick chapter from this book, The Time Traveller's Guide to Medieval England. I thought it was quite appropriate as I'm sat here in this fantastic bedroom in this little castle folly. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the story. Thanks for joining me.